What's up, everybody, and welcome to the 5280 podcast on the MHRT network. I am your host, Mundungus Greavy, alongside my co-host, Glenn Hauser, Gage Madrid, and Cameron Parker. I even pointed the right way. Look at that. All four of us right here. And it is a fantastic episode, aside from the crap we just saw on Sunday, because we have a very, very special guest on the show. He is a Broncos country legend, Darren McKee, everybody. Darren McKee, Mr. DMac, what's up?
What is up, boys? I'm coming to you live from 16th Street Mall, where buses are coming by me and people with carts and music, because we are fired up, guys, for the Rockies to lose their 100th game of the year tonight. Come on.
See, that's the thing is, like, now I have to know, why are you going to the Rockies game?
Because they beat the Dodgers earlier today. So they have not lost 100 games yet. I have not been to a Rockies. See, there's a bus. I told you. I have not been to a Rockies game all year. My schedule amazingly came wide open last week, so I could do things in the afternoon. And so I called my wife and I said, "You want to see the Rockies lose 100?" And she said, "Sure." So we're sitting here, and I'm on my bike. I talk about my bike all the time. There's my bike. I bike to downtown Denver. It's a beautiful night. And we're going to go see the Rockies lose 100. So I am not rooting for them to lose, but I'm wanting to see history, fellas.
Okay.
Just like the Broncos, should have they gone for that field goal at the end of the game, man?
Listen, let me bring something up. I get fired, CU gets crushed, the Broncos lose in epic fashion, and the Rockies might lose 100 all in the same week. Yay, sports!
Week, man.
Yay, sports!
So I gotta ask you, D-Mac. So with this being the Rockies season, we know the Rockies been piss poor for a while. But if they do lose 100 games, like, how do you qualify if this is truly like the worst year that they've ever had? Because, like,
by their record, Cameron, it's not complicated.
I'm just like.
Really? 1, 2, 3. Should we keep going for Cameron? 4, 5. Let's get to a number they've never had before. And what I love about terrible seasons, there's 30 other teams that figured out how to do it better than you. So when you lose a record amount of games, every team in Rockies history figured out how to be better than you guys. I mean, that is actually, like, every single team in the NFL figured out how to not give up 70 before the Broncos going back to 1966. When you hit numbers like that, you got to be proud.
Yeah, once you get past fingers and toes, Cameron's done. So,
yeah. So, D-Mac, you've never been shy about asking the challenging question. So this question is two-part. What would you have asked Sean Payton after the debacle in Miami, first of all? And secondly, what is the most uncomfortable interaction you've had as far as a question-answer period with a press conference?
Well, the most uncomfortable one was when Marquette King was about to beat me up. And he came up to me and said, "Keep my name out of your mouth." This was before Will Smith and Chris Rock. And what had happened is that he was disrespectful towards Brandon Stokely, didn't know who he was. I said that was ridiculous on Twitter. He gave me, it's that pornographic thing of emoji. It's, not a good thing. And then I was out at training or at practice, I think the next day, and Marquette King is like looking for me by name. Like, where's DMac? Who's DMac? Where's DMac? And somebody pointed him out, one of those gutless muggles that wouldn't stand up for me. And Marquette King, and I get it, he's a punter, but Marquette King may have been the most yoked up punter of all time. I mean, that dude was fit. And he comes up to me and he goes, "Are you DMac?" And I go, "Yeah." "Keep your name out of my mouth." And I go, "Or what?" And then he takes a step to me and says, "Keep my name out of your mouth." And I go, "Or what?" And because, like, what's going to happen here? Is he really going to punch me? I mean, am I about to be assaulted by the punter? And it was pretty funny the next day. VJ, who was the coach, he comes up to me to sort of apologize on behalf of the team and just said, "DMac, the punter? Really?" And it was kind of a funny moment. But I learned things about Marquette King. And, listen, guys have issues, okay? So I don't I don't like hate Marquette King. Guys have certain issues. Maybe I'll just keep it at that, and I wish him the best. The other really famous one, of course, is I had a lot of run-ins with Emmanuel Sanders. I mean, like multiple, too many to kind of count. And then we hashed it all out on the air, which was really, really great radio. And I actually became friends with Emmanuel after that. So those are probably my two big ones. What was your first question? There was something else in there.
What would you have asked Sean Payton in Miami?
Oh, well, I actually was on the Zoom call with Sean yesterday. So I did ask him a question, but I didn't ask him the best question. I felt I was a little mad at myself. The best question was actually asked by Sean Keeler of the Denver Post. I asked him, he talked about, see, the problem with like these Zoom calls, you don't get to ask the first question. You have to wait to. So if I'm in a press conference setting where I can just sort of let it rip, then I can control the narrative and control the question. That's what I like the best. But when you have to be the seventh or eighth person, sometimes the question you were going to ask was asked, just not in the way you would have asked it. So I try to follow up because he talked about the grit of the players, the grit of the coaches. So I said, well, how do you feel about the grit of the players in Vance Joseph? So I did say Vance Joseph by name, and he was okay with the answer. He just says, well, we got to prove it. We got to see what's what. Like, okay, fine. But Sean Keeler asked the best question because he asked, in light of your criticisms of past coaching last year, how would you evaluate what's going on now? That's a much better question. I wish I had asked it. So props to Sean Keeler for asking that, because really that's the big thing Sean Payton has to answer right now, fellas. If you were ripping Nathaniel Hackett to Jarrett Bell, what's going on now? I mean, I'm sure that's what you guys are talking about too.
Mm-hmm. So I was going to say the first question in terms of Vance Joseph, this is his second go-around now. This is his second go-around with the Denver Broncos. It was clear that he didn't really have any ill will toward the organization, because if he did, he probably would never have come back, to the Broncos. But it's also revisionist history. He didn't really end well in Denver as a head coach, and right now it appears that the Broncos have a defensive problem, maybe not necessarily an offensive problem, which through 3 games, I don't know if any Bronco fan would have actually predicted that, averaging close to 24 points a game. And, I think obviously giving up 70 points, to the Miami Dolphins. But I mean, where do they go from here? I mean, so much was made publicly on social media. And, I know he's even asked, in the conference call about moving on from Vance Joseph, but like, one, I guess, should they have made the right call in letting go of Vance Joseph, or do they wait a little bit more? Do they wait a little bit more till the after the season stuff, proceeds, and then they make that final call and start possibly a whole rebuild process?
Well, I just don't see any reason to fire anybody, guys, until the bye week. Now, the bye week comes at a really good time because it comes after 8 games right in the middle of the season, and it comes, fellas, if you look at it, right before the trade deadline. So what are we doing here? Firing anybody at this point doesn't make sense, because how are you supposed to rebuild in 3 days anyway? It's not like that. You can see where you're at the bye week, fellas. And don't forget, you've got the Chiefs twice before the bye week, okay? It's a pretty easy schedule theoretically. I mean, everything's tough now. But, I mean, you do have the Bears, and then you have the Jets. The Jets at home with Nathaniel Hackett, who apparently sucked, right? All we heard is how bad Nathaniel Hackett was, and you got Zach Wilson. So again, these are 2 teams, like, if you can't beat the Bears on the road, who are you going to beat on the road? And if you can't beat Nathaniel Hackett, who is supposedly terrible, well, who are you going to beat with Zach Wilson? And I don't know if you saw what Joe Namath said today. It's pretty funny. Yeah. Joe Namath just absolutely destroyed everybody connected to the Jets, so they're falling apart too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I guess my question, DMac, is going to be a little bit more outside the boxes. I'm someone who is kind of a little bit young and upcoming in this media space. I guess my question is, like, what advice would you give to someone who is a young upcomer in this media space?
Get a job in a restaurant as a waiter, high end perhaps, because they have the best tips. No, do you want to make money, or you just want to have fun?
I mean, both. I mean, I've been really grinding hard on YouTube, and that is starting to go in a positive direction.
Well, I'll tell you this. And I haven't given up working in commercial radio. I want to work in commercial radio. I've done it a lot of my life. I think I'm good at it. And I love Denver, and I have no intentions of going anywhere. So to say that I don't want to work in commercial radio would just be a lie. So I'm not saying that whatsoever. However, you can sort of see certain things coming in the world of media. And I saw, for example, when the NFL started being broadcast on rock stations like 30 years ago or something, it was pretty obvious to me that the NFL and the more dynamic format of FM radio would be a way for sports talk to go. It just sounded better. It was more dynamic, all that. So I did see that. And the station I grew up listening to, WBCN in Boston, is now 98.5 The Sports Hub. And I was offered a job at WAAF in Boston with this guy, Rich Hill. Well, he's the morning show guy on WEEI, which is a sports talk station. So, the Fan that I was on for 15 and a half years, they started off on 950 and then they went to 104.3. So I guess my best advice to you is, first of all, you have no idea what's going to exist in the future that you might be doing. So keep an open mind to everything, and don't sit around and wait. If you got something you want to do, just like you guys are doing, I think this is awesome. I mean, go for it. Don't sit around waiting for permission. Just get to it. And I'm in that, hey man, I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you guys right now, although I'm still looking for work. But let's face it, my kids already graduated high school, and you probably got to worry about a date this weekend. My kids are out of college, and I don't know how your dating life is going. You got to put some work in, probably.
Yep.
Slow. I haven't dated in 16 years.
there you go, fellas. So it's all, hey man, in all seriousness, it's what you want to get out of life. I've been absurdly lucky to have the life that I've had, to be in the media and have kids who have graduated college. And I have an unbelievable wife. Our 29th wedding anniversary was 2 days ago, and she's about to meet me for a game at Coors to watch the Rockies lose and have a couple of beers. So I'm going through a tough time professionally right now, but I hope to rebound. So my advice is the same advice to me. Like, just shut up and don't complain and just get going. And that's what I would tell myself.
Awesome.
Sounds like sage advice. Now I know you need to get going to that Rockies game. I don't want to get in the way of the wife coming. So I've got one more question.
Okay.
And it's an easy one, but it's a two-part that go together.
Okay.
Do you think the Broncos are in a rebuild? And if they are, how would you start that out?
They're definitely not in a rebuild, fellas. And boy, have I droned on and on about this, because unless you draft a quarterback with a high draft pick in the top 5 or top 10, you're not really committed to a rebuild. You're not. It's as simple as that. And that doesn't mean it's going to work out, but no rebuild starts unless you commit to a top 10 quarterback. But it doesn't always work out. Look at the problem. And I love Justin Fields, and it saddens me that he's not doing better. But nothing can start in a true rebuild, fellas, unless you use a top 10 pick on a quarterback and you commit to him. The end. So no, they're not in a rebuild. They're trying to fix things.
Zach Wilson.
One last question. I'm sorry, but would you pick the Broncos against the Bears in your Survivor?
No, I wouldn't. Here's why. The trickiest games to win are non-conference road games. They're the least meaningful games on the schedule. Teams at home inherently have an advantage point-wise to win. I just would never pick a road game in a survivor pool like that. I just wouldn't do it. It wouldn't matter who it was.
All right. Thank you for that.
All right, well, I definitely appreciate you joining us. Darren, where can people find you on social medias?
Well, I guess on X, Twitter, at DMacRadio. I'm kind of putting everything there. So if you find me there, you can kind of find everything else. And boys, I think it's great what you're doing. And if you want me back, I can find more, flavor here in downtown Denver, like buses and people screaming for season and, other stuff anytime you want.
Well, again, awesome. We greatly appreciate you joining. You go have a great night. Enjoy the date night with your wife. And hopefully the Rockies lose and give you another record. Woo!
I want to be part of history. Let's
do it, man.
All right, DMac, we'll see you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much, DMac.
Appreciate you, man.
Well, that was fun.
That was great.
Now we get to talk about the Broncos.
But I have to say, I get sometimes, DMac is a little bit of a misconception at times, for some people on social media, but this is truly the case where if you get to know him on a personal level, and I had the opportunity to intern at 104.3 The Fan, so I got the chance to really kind of experience him, even behind closed doors, and that was actually even when Edwards even became famous. So just the idea of actually getting the chance to see him and really get to know him, he is such a gentle soul, truly.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
All right.
I love what he said to Gage, though. That was great, man.
That was awesome.
I'm glad you asked that question.
Yeah, that was really. I was thinking about what kind of question I could ask, and I was like, would this question come across as too selfish here? But I felt like that was a really awesome answer.
I will.
Because that question applies to so many people your age. Like I think it's fantastic.
Because I will tell you, had you not asked that, Gage, I was going to ask that. Like even
we're all old. We figured it out. So you go right ahead. All right. So let's talk.
I have a
about
better
this.
chance of being the Golden Bachelor than national radio.
All right. So let's talk about this Broncos game. I suppose.
Yeah, I guess we kind of have to.
All right. 70-20 was the final score.
All right, that's it. All right, let's talk about those.
That's it. Bye.
All right, we're done. Adios.
I think right after the game, everybody was screaming to fire Vance Joseph. Obviously, that didn't happen. I was one of them, but at the same time, now that I've had a chance to think back over it, that probably is a good move, not firing. Because at this point, like, what would anything make a difference at this point? If you let Vance Joseph go, would anybody be able to come in and fix it in a week? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's the argument. But I think the thing is, like, you weren't the only one, that was calling for Vance's. I even had a tweet that was like, when you put up X amount of points, granted, it kept going up. It kept going up as soon as I hit send. But, like, when you allow that many points, it's like you at least have to have the conversation of there has to be some changes moving forward. And I think that this is what it pains me to say, because I think the Broncos, as crazy as, and I said it to DMAC, but it's as crazy as it sounds, the Broncos find themselves in more of a defensive struggle now than they do on the offensive side of the ball through 3 games. That's crazy to say. And not only that, I never thought I would say this, because the talent on the defensive side of the ball has been rather good for the course of the post-Manning era or even that 2015 era. But gentlemen, we are entering an era where the talent discrepancy and the coaching with Vance Joseph is possibly at its worst point than we've ever seen. And and I think to wrap it all up, kudos to George Payton for making the trade for Russell Wilson. You can, you easily should have made that trade any day of the week, because you have to swing for the fences like that. However, and this is by that same token, when you make a trade like that, you're also sacrificing draft capital, and in doing so, it will severely hamper the depth of your football team. And right now, we are seeing a huge depth problem on this team.
Yep. I think Cam summed it up beautifully. Right now, Vance Joseph is basically being tasked with making chicken salad out of chicken shit. And as we all know, even when he had proper talent and the proper ingredients to make chicken salad in 2017, 2018, the defense was still horrible. So at the end of the day, man, Vance Joseph was not the right coordinator to coordinate this defense that clearly had several deficiencies in talent, especially when you look at the secondary, having to depend on somebody like Damari Mathis to start because he totally struggled in training camp. I feel like the injury to PJ Locke really has decimated this team. PJ Locke would have at least been able to hold his own out there with all of our issues at safeties between Justin Simmons' injuries and Kareem Jackson's ejections, and then Baron Browning, and then obviously with Caden Stearns too, between injuries, which are going to happen. That's why you need sufficient depth and just an overall, we're starting non-starters at starting positions. I mean, we're depending on guys like John Harris to be one of your starting defensive linemen being rotated in with guys like Matt Henningsen. That's not going to get it done at the end of the day, man. This team has to commit to a full rebuild on the defensive side of the ball. And what's unfortunate here is Russell Wilson's back. He's back. He's literally playing at a top 10 level right now, both
maybe
by the
higher.
numbers, maybe even higher, by both the metric of numbers and tape, man. I'm a tape guy, but I also respect the numbers. Every way you look at it, Russell Wilson's playing at a super extraordinary high level. Tim Jenkins went through and got a Russell Wilson film study before I could. He said this was his highest graded game for Russell Wilson as a Bronco. It unfortunately had to come in the same game where your defense plays basically at the level you almost expect them to play at against a superstar juggernaut offense. Like, this offense could literally be the best offense we've seen since like 2013 Broncos, the greatest show on turf. Like, that's the caliber that this offense is. And when you're going against a chicken shit defense like the Broncos, you're going to get absolutely outmatched. And at the end of the day, that also can't excuse the fact that the team gave up at the end, man. You see those screens to Devon Achane where 6 guys were on the ground for the Denver Broncos at one point in time. When we were already down 70-20, we gave up a 56-yard run, 62-yard run, whatever it was. Like, this team shows no fight. They show no heart. This team has a severe lack of dogs, man.
You hate to use the word. I was going to say you hate to use the E word, but they lack effort.
Yeah, they do.
When you're talking about Tim Jenkins rating Russ's game as the best, I mean, and that's with 2 touchdown passes being taken off the board due to Brandon Johnson penalties. That's with Cortland Sutton fumbling the ball twice and ending drives that then immediately ended up, resulting in touchdowns. I mean, what could have been? I mean, not to say that the Broncos could have kept up with the juggernaut that was Miami, but there was a time there where they were within a couple scores and they had the ball, which would have been at the end of the second quarter and then to start the third. And, the whole nature of things changed when Cortland fumbled that and was almost run in for a touchdown. And then immediately thereafter it was a score. And I mean, it was just the ship had sailed at that point. I mean, it's, the effort in that one picture says it all, that where the players are just across the field. And I've never seen anything like it in all my years watching.
You know what it reminded me of? Albert Hainsworth, that famous clip of Albert Hainsworth on that Monday night game against the Eagles, man, where he just was flat on his stomach while Michael Vick was running around and threw a touchdown. That literally reminds me of that Eagles-Commanders game from way back in the day. That's literally what that reminds me of.
I was going to say, I'm not trying to spin this positively. But truly, if there's only one positive that you can truly make about a 70-20 game, is it happened in Game 3 of a Sean Payton era, and I think that look, I'm not trying to say that it was not a despicable performance, because it's 70-20. Like, those are video game numbers. That is something that you script up in an NFL lab, basically, which apparently I guess is exactly what they scripted for the NFL. But in terms of building the culture, and this goes off of what we talked about with culture, when you are building a football team, another positive about this is it also allows you to pick and choose the players you want on your football team, the winners and the losers, if you will, that you want to continue with on your franchise. Maybe that is Russell Wilson. Maybe that is some players on the defensive side of the ball. But I mean, I think that's the key is like when you want to commit to a full rebuild, a game like that allows you to notice some players that stand out above the rest. And if there is a positive, and granted they did come very few and far between, there was one positive in that game, and it was rookie Marvin Mims. Marvin Mims, or I should say Marvin Hims Jr., is an absolute dude. I mean, when you have the possibility of having two of your wide receivers maybe in the future with Jerry Jeudy and Marvin Mims to go with whoever your quarterback will be, whether it is Russell Wilson in the future or whether it is a top 10, pick or wherever you have, I think that when you have that capability to grow something like that out of a young wide receiver unit, that's special. And we said it before, but the Tyler Lockett vibes are even more so now with the kickoff return that he had, the deep threat, his ability to be a space threat in the offense. He is so fun to watch.
Yeah,
Yep.
David, it was a mix of both.
Sure was.
But I did have.
So, Mike, just to expound on David's question, is Russell Wilson had a no trade clause in his contract, and to me, it had to have been definitely clear that there was going to be a new contract coming should he agree to come to the Denver Broncos. So,
Absolutely.
I think that was a major part of him agreeing to say yes and waiving that no trade clause.
Yeah, and so this is kind of the thought that I've been running with over the last couple of days, trying to digest this game. We sit here and we talk about Russell Wilson and the trade and the extension. I love Russell Wilson. I think he's playing amazing. I think he's going to have a great year. However, because of that trade, we weren't able to land players like Jalen Carter or Jordan Davis or, defensive players like that, which is why we're in the situation that we're in. Do I think that it's eventually going to pay off with Russell Wilson? Yes. But at this point in time, was that trade really worth it, seeing how our defense was against Miami?
I hate to say hindsight is 2020, but I said it earlier. But hindsight is 2020. You make that trade every single day of the week. So I don't commend it. But as I said earlier, it's just by that same token, when you give up that draft capital, you're also sacrificing your draft depth that you're building up. And we are severely paying the price for that. I think the other dilemma, and to feed off of that, Mike, I think the other dilemma that the Broncos are going to find themselves in, let's say they do suck this year, and you do have that contract, they are still going to find themselves with a very interesting quandary that if they have a top 5 pick in a rather heavy quarterback class of a top 5 pick, I'm sorry, but again, I love Russell Wilson, but I'm one of those people that might be banging the table for the Broncos to draft a Drake May or a Michael Penix Jr. Some of those players that, if they're available, you have to consider that because, at that point you'll have a cost-controlled quarterback, and you have to consider everything that's on the table, but not just that, obviously, not just the quarterback position, but you'll also have guys like a Marvin Harrison Jr., possibly within that discussion. Maybe even a Keon Coleman who's really coming on strong with Florida State. So it's just there are a lot of problems. It's kind of like a rock on a hard place is the best way to explain it, but it's a rock on a hard place.
I have not started scouting players yet. Is there any blue chip defensive linemen in this class?
I'd have to take a look as well, but another one of I don't know the exact name, but who knows? I know that when we talk about a rebuild, sometimes you do have to sacrifice offensive talent or offensive players to get what you want on the defensive side of the ball, or sacrifice something else to bring in something else. And so I will say, if they move on from guys like Courtland Sutton, which they were close, if you can read the tea leaves of what was going on in social media, that it seemed like there was a close trade that was going to happen with the Baltimore Ravens, but also there is a Penn State tackle that is maybe the best tackle in the country. So what I'm trying to say is, if they move on from Garrett Bowles, who has looked not like Garrett Bowles, he's kind of looked more like Garrett Holds lately. I mean, it's like it's you have to make that decision. That do you move on from him and draft this Penn State tackle if you are in that kind of position?
Yep. And with Russell Wilson, to kind of draw the conversation back to him, the Broncos are going to have to make a decision on Russell Wilson, because on the fourth day of the 2024 league year, Russell Wilson, if he is on the roster, his 2025 salary becomes, I believe, fully guaranteed, at least mostly guaranteed. So that means that the Broncos basically will have to decide if they want Russell Wilson on the roster for the next 2 years. If we get to a point at the end of the year where, let's say Russ continues to play lights out and he's playing at this same high level, do we have the conversation about maybe trying to move off of him in a potential trade? I don't know if anyone would give up capital for that significant bloated whale of a contract. The other option is, does the team swallow their medicine now and eat a $35 million dead cap hit in 2024 and get Russ off the books? But by that same notion, you're basically committing to a rookie quarterback and having that rookie contract, which is really the best kind of medicine if the Broncos were to move off from Russell Wilson. So the way I see it is, the only way that the Broncos would move off from Russell Wilson is if they know for sure they're going to get a rookie quarterback in the draft.
I agree. And Russ is going
to hold on a sec. Biggie, we want to answer your question, but I'm not sure what that is. If you can expand on that, we'd love to answer it.
Yeah.
All right,
so Russ is going to be turning 35 during the season. And as well as he has played, Gage makes an excellent point, is that you have to take a quarterback if we're in a position that high up in the draft and make a decision that way. Look at the San Francisco 49ers and where they're able to sign these big deals and lock up all of this talent and make trades for players like Christian McCaffrey, even though they've given up so much to move up to draft Trey Lance. It's because now they were paying Trey Lance short money. Then they get Brock Purdy in the last pick of the draft. He's making no money right now. So they're not committed to these huge dollars on the quarterback side, and they're able to allocate that to some of the skill players on both sides of the ball. And that's really where the Broncos are going to have to get at some point sooner than later.
What's crazy about Purdy, he's literally the cheapest starting quarterback in the NFL right now by a wide margin, and he's one of the best starting quarterbacks in the NFL as well. That's pretty crazy to think about.
Most efficient. I think another.
Well, yeah,
and I think the other point with Russell Wilson in terms of his contract that will definitely have that effect is the restructure idea. Again, I think also, like, the moment, say, you do draft a quarterback, you draft a Drake May, you draft a Michael Penix Jr., maybe you draft a Shedeur Sanders, or whoever is going to be within your top 5 reach that you actually want. That's the big thing. Like, who the Broncos want is who they should be taking, whether it's a top 5 pick. But like the restructure idea, is something that like needs to happen. And obviously we're forecasting the future on this. But say they do take a quarterback like that, I absolutely would restructure Russell's contract, because then at that point, you're not just signaling that Russ is going to be the quarterback possibly for 2024, but you're also signaling with that draft pick of what you're going to be taking of Drake May and others that he's your quarterback of the future. You mentioned about the San Francisco 49ers. Of course, there's the other idea that and again, it's not really comparable per se, but if there's any example, they should take it from the Kansas City Chiefs. I hate to say it, but take the Patrick Mahomes example. That you had Alex Smith, who at the time actually wasn't that bad of a quarterback with the Kansas City Chiefs, but they still took that swing and they took Pat Mahomes, and right now he's one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen. And it pains me to say that, but I like, it's just, It's just going to depend on, I guess, if Russ would want to do something like that, and if he would want to restructure. But I think maybe there's the other caveat about this. We don't necessarily know Sean Payton's intentions right now with Russ. And if he actually comes out and truly defends it during the season, that says Russ is going to be that guy with his play and what we've seen, and in terms of the long term, then I think we have a pretty decent idea that it's pretty obvious they want to win with Russ for the time being, because and it goes back to what Russ was mentioning. He wants to play until he was 40.
And I think with how well Russ is playing right now, I think we seriously have to have that conversation, because Russ is playing like the quarterback we traded for. He's playing like the Seattle Russell Wilson. That's why I feel like we really need to have that conversation. Like, there is a chance that Russ is the guy moving into this, and maybe the Broncos can try to expedite their rebuild on the defensive side of the ball, try to accumulate some assets. You might have to make a sacrifice with, let's say, Justin Simmons. Sorry, Cam, I know you got that 31 jersey in the back.
Again!
And so do you, Glenn. I see yours back there too, yeah. But, that's one where I feel like we might have to sacrifice at a position that's already kind of weak, safety, to accumulate more resources on a position where I feel like we desperately need to accumulate more resources, and that's interior D-line.
Yeah.
So I kind of have, and this ties in with everything we've been talking about. I have a question. It's going to be a little long-winded because I got to build into it, right? So we know that
I like to build a house when we do.
I want to be like Cam. I want to continue to talk, and then use 1 second for my question. So after the Miami game, we can see the deficiencies on the team. We know that there are issues with Vance Joseph. We know that there have been issues with George Payton. We know that there are issues with Sean Payton. Some of them can be fixed, like the penalties, the effort, the things that can be easily, or the things that can be cleaned up. I think we can fix eventually. My first question is, do we think that George Payton makes it to next season?
I don't know. I really don't know. I really don't think so.
I don't.
But again, I hate to circle back on a conversation that we had when Sean Payton was hired, and he said it in his presser. Mickey Loomis was there with New Orleans Saints, and he didn't exactly have the relationship with him, but they built it over time, and and they were able to garner that kind of relationship over time and build exactly what they wanted to. So I hate to call, exactly what we had, had the conversation of. So, but I don't know. It's still though, the biggest difference from what you saw with Mickey Loomis and what you saw or what you're seeing with the Broncos right now is the Broncos are having a losing season. Like when Loomis was with the Saints, they actually were turning it around in 2006. In Sean Payton's first years, when they started turning it around. So if they don't turn it around, then absolutely, you absolutely have to have. And I will say George Payton's seat is simmering right now.
Yeah,
it is definitely simmering. I actually want to ask you, Mike, because you kind of triggered some of us, myself included, in the group chat. I
tried.
Which time?
Yeah. But I want to ask you, and I want you to defend yourself, why you said what you said, which was you felt like maybe Dan Quinn would have the Broncos in a much better position.
Well, I think, and so initially looking at it, right, the biggest problem right now is the discipline on the defense, whether it be penalties, whether it be tackling, whether it be add the scheme in there. It just, nothing seems to fit. And so for me, it's like, if we would have gone with, say, a Dan Quinn, who's like the Cowboys defense is playing lights out, and it has for the last couple of years. And that's why Dallas has turned it around, is because Dan Quinn's work on the defense. So my way of thinking was, if we had been able to get Dan Quinn to help on the defensive side of the ball, I think that we wouldn't have played as bad over these last 3 games as we did. Now, granted, you can see that the offense is playing better, but the defense is way worse than it has been over the last couple of years.
The best or the worst we've ever seen.
Right. And so for me, my way of thinking was we could have had Dan Quinn at $10 million less, lost no draft picks, and our defense would have been playing better. That's where my head was at the time.
I have about 3 points to counter that with, honestly, because I'm actually going to completely disagree with you, especially with the results we're seeing on the offensive side of the ball, man. That alone has proven that Sean Payton, for me at least, was the correct hire. Now, with the defensive side of the ball, again, man, the cupboard's bare, and that's a result of us not having depth. Hindsight is 2020, like we've been saying this whole podcast with the whole Russell Wilson trade, but that's just the kind of the situation you're at right now. I don't know if Dan Quinn would have fixed that. Dan Quinn's a phenomenal defensive coordinator. We've seen his body of work as a head coach, and it's been a mixed bag. Ever since Kyle Shanahan left the Atlanta Falcons, the Dan Quinn Falcons went downhill, and he made some very questionable hires at offensive coordinator. I mean, he eventually tried to resort back to Dirk Cutter as offensive coordinator, who was Matt Ryan's old OC back in the day. I mean, at the end of the day, that was something that he was unable to figure out, was that offensive coordinator. So I had concerns that the offensive side of the ball wouldn't have improved at the level that we needed it to improve at. So we almost would have been in the same situation that we were in last year, where the defense would have probably been better. Yeah. I mean, they would have at least been more disciplined, but the offense would not have been carrying their weight, I feel like. Because I heard that Dan Quinn's hire for OC probably would have been Brian Schottenheimer. There's prior relationship between Russ and Brian Schottenheimer, and it's not good. So I just don't feel like Dan Quinn would have done. It would have been a different way to get to the same place that we're at right now, if that makes any sense.
Didn't Wilson have his best years under Schottenheimer?
He also didn't like him.
Yeah, he did not like him.
Russ came out and said they're still friends. They talk on the phone every week.
You can have a good personal relationship with someone. Doesn't mean it's always going to be a good professional relationship.
Yeah. Right. I talk to all you guys once a week, and I don't like you any.
I don't like any. and I think a lot of that came about from, when you hire a guy like Sean Payton, you have certain expectations of, well, we're not going to see the same penalty issues. We're not going to see the same discipline issues. And the problem that I was having is that with a coach like Sean Payton, as ballyhooed as he is or whatever, like we're still having the same issues, if not worse than we did last year. And so for me, it's like, well, maybe he wasn't the right hire. Obviously I think he is, but I just he's not meeting the expectations that I thought we were going to hit just within the first year.
You hit a trigger point with me, Mike. You did.
What I'm here for.
With the penalties, there are different type of penalties. If you look at the penalties from last year, we aren't seeing virtually any pre-snap penalties on the offensive side of the ball. That was the biggest issue for us last year, was false starts, delay a game, shit like that. With this team this year, I feel like for the most part we've been pretty clean with the offensive operation. And that we've had some hiccups here and there, having to burn timeouts, all 3 of our timeouts in the Washington game in the first half. But that's been a lot cleaner. What's been the issue has been the defensive side of the ball. The penalties are all coming from that side of the ball. And again, we can circle this back to, sure, Sean Payton made the wrong decision to hire Vance Joseph. That's pretty clear and obvious now. But what Sean Payton's baby is the offense, and that looks significantly different than last year.
Yeah. And I was going to say to the Dan Quinn stuff, I mean, let's not forget, when we talk about the discipline and the defensive side of the ball, they are also a rather high penalized team on the defensive side of the ball. So it's not like, we probably wouldn't be missing much, in terms of all the penalties on the defensive side of the ball. We may be playing at a higher energy and, and not giving up 70 points, but I think the thing that I have to, tell myself, even for Dan Quinn, is this. Dan Quinn may have solved the issue in 2 years, but in the long term, Dan Quinn is not the right coach for the Broncos. That's where Sean, and I think that's the point that needs to be driven home. It's not so much that Dan Quinn maybe was the right coach for 2023, 2024. It's that Sean Payton is the right coach for 2023, 2024, and beyond. And that's the point, is when you have that kind of culture shift, as far as with Payton, that's where it's going to lie, is that he wants to build it exactly the way that he wants to build. I mean, let's circle back to a conversation about what he wanted, right? What he wanted in a Bronco or in a coaching gig. He wanted stability. He wanted a place that is, you got an ownership that's going to buy in exactly with what it is that he wants to do. You also want a team that is going to buy in exactly what he wants to do, and meaning he has a lot of control of what is going to happen. And that's going to take time. I mean, so you're not exactly going to see those results in 2023, but to be fair, you are seeing the offensive results to what Gage is saying. And so that is going to take some time. I mean, yeah, they're 0-3. I hate to say this statistic again, but yeah, they're 0-3. And the Broncos were 2-1 under Hackett. But we're looking at a 10-point difference right now between the 3 games of 14.3 and like 24 points per game for the Broncos. It is staggering.
I was just trying to find the penalty situation for the Broncos. I know they had 19 after 2 games. I did not know they had the 3rd game, but to Cam's
multiple offsides, man.
Yeah,
multiple offsides.
And Brandon Johnson, I mean, he took 2 touchdowns off the board. I mean, just
and to be fair, Brandon Johnson's penalty was a bit ticky-tack, but still, to flip it on to John, you can't put yourself in that situation.
But he also had that motion penalty where he didn't stop on that. So, and
that's also, I'll put that one on Russ, though. Russ needs to notice that his wide receiver's not set and wait a second on his cadence before he goes and snaps the ball. I'm actually putting that one on Russ. That's one of the few bad plays that Russ had, in my opinion, from that game.
Fair enough. But, can you imagine if we had chosen a defensive coach and not, it would have been status quo? We had people that were saying, 16 points, here we are again, after game 1, but overlooking the fact that there were 6 possessions in the entire game for the Broncos and the Raiders as well. And we scored on 3 of those possessions, missed a field goal on a 4th. I mean, that is a very successful week, even though we were only at 16 points. The fact that we're at the point level that we are, Russ is performing, younger players are actually doing well. We're just not running it enough. I don't understand what's going on to that fashion. But if we had hired a defensive coach to take over this crew, I think we would have been even worse off than we are.
Yeah.
So my next question kind of ties into that. So we know from KOA, Big Al, Ryan Edwards, that a phone call was in fact made from George Payton to Rex Ryan after the Dolphins game.
Was there?
There was.
Tell him to shut up?
No. Actually, yeah, he did.
Wait, Rex Ryan told him to shut up, or?
Yeah, Rex Ryan is basically like,
Is this true, Mike? I did not hear this.
Yeah,
I didn't either. Okay.
Did
this is like video material for me, so keep talking.
Did Logan say it, or who said it?
So my question is, if Sean Payton's first pick as a defensive coordinator is Vic Fangio, I know Fangio said he didn't want to come because of like Broncos media and the distraction, but if he was his first pick, should Sean Payton have pushed a little bit harder to try to get him onto the team? We all said while he was head coach, he's a terrible head coach, but a great defensive coordinator. Should he have pushed harder to bring Vic Fangio back?
I think the first choice would have been to keep Evero, but he wasn't going to stay based on what happened to his best friend. And so then they moved on to Fangio. And I mean, Payton even admitted that he didn't, I don't think they'd ever worked together. I don't think he knew him all that well, but he still was trying to convince him to come on board.
They had a lot of chemistry, but they never played together or coached together.
Yeah, and Vic would never come back. I mean, he's not the type of guy that he didn't need to. But the fact is Rex Ryan has been a free agent, so to speak, many, many years, and no one gives a crap. It just happens to be that he would now that he's back in the mix, the Broncos defense is struggling. We see the picture of him in the hotel waiting for Zuber to come and take him to Broncos headquarters. He's not the answer either.
Yeah,
he's not the answer either. I can't believe they called him. That's crazy.
Well, and I think that this is going to bear watching because here to circle back to the beginning of the pod, even with DMac and when we talked about Vance Joseph and and he mentioned about you don't fire a defensive coordinator in the season. If it is true that they did call Rex Ryan, then it's going to bear watching, because if that happened, then maybe they do make some sort of change in the season and something like that. But the other thing that's going to bear watching is the Christian Parker watch. As much as we want to talk about the Vance Joseph stuff, and I love Christian Parker. He's a brother from another mother. He's got my last name. So of course I'm going to love Christian Parker. But no, he is a brilliant mind, and Vance definitely spoke really highly of him. But I gotta say, it bears watching with him. As much as we want to criticize Vance, the defensive back room, the secondary is also really bad. But he's also, a really smart coordinator, a future coordinator. So if they move on from Vance at the end of the season, and maybe you have the conversation about promoting Parker at that point, after the season, let's have this phone call with Rex Ryan, bring him in as a defensive consultant, and then that's when you're having possibly an opportunity where you're cooking with grease.
Yep, and that's what I was going to say with Rex Ryan. I don't think that phone call was to be a defensive coordinator. That phone call was probably going to be like, hey, do you want to come in and be a defensive consultant? Do you basically want to be like the Mike Westhoff,
Jerry Rosberg,
or Jerry Rosberg? Yeah. That come on, man. They're both old heads. It's pretty easy to confuse them. But
dude, I'd rather have Wade Phillips come back, man.
That would actually make a lot of sense, because Wade Phillips is a prior mentor to Vance Joseph.
Yeah. He can't.
Why?
Because contractually he's with XFL. He can't.
He could get out of that contract.
Yeah.
I mean, if he want to make a return to the NFL, he can say, sorry, XFL.
That's what I thought, but I was told otherwise, that he can't get out of he's locked into the contract with the XFL. We can't tamper. We can't touch him.
Interesting.
Jeff Bryan has the best comment of the night.
So my next question is kind of a deeper question, because obviously changes are going to be made right now. Like right after the game, my initial thought was, well, let's go get a bunch of free agents and help with the depth, but we don't have the cap space right now. So in order to do so, I'm thinking like you're going to have to trade away I obviously I don't want to get rid of Simmons. Don't touch PS2. Don't touch Javonte. But I think that
touch Judy.
Judy. I think you could get your draft picks worth out of like a Cortland Sutton, a DJ Jones, a
Randy Gregory,
a Garrett Bowles, like something like that, or all of them. Like trade them all. Go get some draft capital. And for me, let's say the Broncos get like a top 3 pick. I don't think they take a quarterback. I think they trade back and get more draft picks for that pick and rebuild it all in one offseason.
I don't know.
Looking ahead to the next draft class or our slate of picks is we don't have a second-round pick, and we traded one of our third-round picks. We had 2. We traded one of our third-round picks to move up to get Riley Moss. So we're still a little thin. We'll have a first round and then 60 picks in between. So
that's why I think Simmons might be a very interesting conversation here. It might be time to sell high on Simmons. Like, I don't think you're getting a first round pick for him. You might get a second rounder for him.
Right. I don't like, for me, if you're not rebuilding and you're just retooling around the defense, why would you get rid of the best safety in the league? Because why wouldn't you keep Simmons as the best safety in the league, to pair with PS2, who's the best corner in the league, to build around on your defense, because you have nobody in the front seven.
Yeah.
Like Singleton, Jewell are not the, like, I love them to death, but they are not the answer at linebacker.
No.
Please don't hang me, Broncos country. I think there have been some subtle signs of decline in Simmons' game this past year. That this is where I think, again, the sell high point comes in, where I don't know if we're going to be able to get a return this high out of Justin Simmons if we continue to let him play at that same level throughout the season, man. That's why I say it might be time to do it a little bit earlier than maybe you should do it, if that makes any sense, just so you can maximize return value.
Well, and I think that to what Mike was talking about and possibly, I think that's why you start first with the obvious. You start first with the obvious, and that would be guys like Garrett Bowles and, Cortland Sutton. Garrett Bowles would have to end up being after the end of the season, because there's no way you're going to be moving on from your tackle, right, during the season, because that's like, if there was any obvious tank job, it would be we're trading Garrett Bowles during the regular season, and that
Cam
would be
Fleming season, baby.
Right. So like that would be like the true we're tanking, with actually like not even saying it. But I think that, I will say this, and everybody knows I'm a huge Simmons fan. I'm not saying they will trade him, but I'm also saying he's not a lock either. And I think that
you take that jersey off your wall right now.
Like I love him to death, but I just think that like we do have to have a conversation in terms of, with a 70-20 game. Granted, he didn't play, and that's not saying like an indictment. And I'm not trying to say that's an indictment on him, but but a lot of conversation has to be centered on where do we go from here, and there probably will be calls about Justin. Do I think that they will? I don't think they will trade him, because it goes back to a much higher degree of what happened with Bradley Chubb. They traded Bradley Chubb, obviously resulted in Sean Payton coming here, but it severed the locker room. I mean, right? That was reported. Like it was reported that, the Chubb deal severed the locker room. You trade Simmons, who is a locker room cornerstone, it would sever that locker room. And obviously, if you do trade him, it would definitely signal that is you're not in a soft rebuild, but in a full rebuild at that point.
I think a move that would signal a soft rebuild, though, and one that I think Broncos country might need to brace themselves for, is Cortland Sutton, man.
Yeah.
He's starting to prove, with those 2 fumbles, that was a liability that cost us points in this game. Obviously, not the difference maker by any stretch. Hell, it could have been. Yeah, it could have been. That fumble that he had at the end of the first half shot us in the foot. We had the opportunity to go down and, I believe, almost tie the game before Miami had a chance to even touch the ball if we played our cards right. Sutton fumbling it really completely ruined that. So that's definitely one where the Broncos can save $14.4 million, I believe it is, if they were to trade away Cortland Sutton. And this could mean we could see more Brandon Johnson. I want more Brandon Johnson, baby. This dude is showing some significant potential. I want to see more Brandon Johnson. And in order to do that, I think that the writing is starting to become on the wall. Cortland Sutton's probably going to be available for a trade.
Agree with you.
What do you think they would get for him, Gage?
I think a 4. That's what I was thinking in my video yesterday. I made a full fire sale video yesterday, and I was saying probably about a 4 for Cortland Sutton, maybe a 3 if it's some championship team that thinks they're one piece away from a championship.
You certainly know it's not going to be a first-round pick. I know that was the rumor that the Broncos wanted a first-round. Or sorry, it was a second-round.
It was Judy they wanted for
yeah. They wanted first for Judy, second for Sutton. But I think that, definitely the soft rebuild would be Sutton. And this is the thing that was just so bad about the Miami game is Cortland Sutton went from having an excellent game to a bad game just by those 2 fumbles. That's kind of how bad it was of a game for him. And so, obviously he probably could have had the second touchdown. We've been down the road with Brandon Johnson, but it's that's where things are with Sutton. And we're getting to the point where a player like that can be replaceable in the draft. And that's where, you can go out and get a guy, especially if you have a mid-round, first-round pick, and you're not going to get a quarterback. That's where a receiver really could come into mind, for the Broncos, at the pick. And also, you hate to even have this conversation, but it's possible the Broncos may move on from 2 wide receivers, and it's not Jerry Jeudy, and it's not even, Brandon Johnson. It's Tim Patrick as well. We had that conversation. It's like, they may even move on from Patrick and Sutton in terms of those contracts. So you're talking about both of those contracts being possibly off the books. You hate to have that conversation, but
it would be over $20 million.
Yeah, they would be significantly in a lot of cap, and we know that the Broncos ownership group is definitely a cash cow, of course.
Yeah. So it's pretty clear at this point that all of us, and I mean everybody, overvalued or overestimated players on the defensive side of the Broncos. Take Simmons out and take PS2 out, because we know that those are like 1-2 in the league at their position. Is there anybody on the defensive side of the ball that you would keep?
Well, you're contractually obligated to keep Zach Allen, so he's kind of here by default, even though he's sorely disappointed. I'm sorry, Cam. Go ahead.
I would keep Alex Singleton.
I almost feel like everybody on our defense would be a second teamer on somebody else's team. I'm
going to get roasted. Truly, I'm going to get roasted for this, and I know I'm biased to my college team, but I badly want to say Randy Gregory. He's got the talent to be a dominant player for this team. We saw glimpses of it last year before he got hurt and missed some significant time. But those injuries are going to be keeping. It's one of the reasons why I got roasted for the article, and I don't know why that I wrote a predominantly orange, but I literally was just talking about in the article about how his best ability is availability. And when you are not available, and when you are available and you kind of disappear, and what we're seeing currently this year is Gregory, aside from the Washington game, has disappeared in 2 of the 3 games. Like the Broncos did not sign up for that. I love Gregory. He's definitely a wiry spider monkey. That's what Browning has called him. But it's just like he is not playing up to that contract. So I badly want to say Gregory. But again, your top 2 defensive players is Pat Surtain and Justin Simmons.
And I think right now on the edge, the better players have been Jonathan Cooper and Nick Benito. For all their flaws, they've made some big splash plays, and it's like you want to see them maybe try to continue that, building that development, because I feel like one of the moves that really has set this roster back was trading away Von Miller. I understand there was maybe some locker room issues, but just in terms of the dominance that Von Miller brought to this team, even last year before he got injured on that crappy turf in Detroit, which was really a fluky injury that never should have happened. I mean, the dude was producing at a top level. He was wreaking havoc on that Bills D-line, and that's a big reason why I feel like the Bills underachieved last year. The move to trade away Von Miller, man, this D-line has never been the same since that point. And I know that could also just be the biased fan in me, but when you look at it from a pure analyst perspective, man, Von Miller on this team would have made a massive difference.
Glenn, you have been requested to speak.
I said Singleton, and if Baron Browning had been healthy this season, I definitely would have included him in. Mobad, all right. I would have definitely included Baron in the Untouchables.
I'm actually really glad you said Baron, Glenn, because wow, that's that.
I mean, that kind of ruins everything we just talked about with the draft.
Biggie Broncos, stop playing Madden. Like, I love you, buddy, but stop playing Madden. Like,
I do think there's a legit question from Cam though, because he was talking about Baron Browning. What about Baron Browning?
Well, so I think with Baron Browning, like that, I think so. I talked about Randy Gregory, right? And obviously, Baron Browning's availability issues are in his own right. That said, though, Baron Browning's potential and what we have seen with him on the field is a reason to get rid of Gregory's contract. So if you were talking trajectory as far as pass rushers and what we've seen, Browning is the type of player that, obviously Drew Sanders didn't play, up to snuff, and you want to see that kind of continue in terms of him playing better. But Baron Browning's a guy that, if you want to buy stock in potentially as a guy that's going to replace Gregory down the line and that contract, he's the guy I'm definitely seeing for sure.
Is he due back in week 5?
I think that's what Mario has even been reporting. Yeah, I think that's what Mario's been reporting too. Is
it's always been early October was the target for him.
Well, that's why earlier I brought up, potential draft picks we could have had if we didn't trade for Russell with Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, because the biggest issue on this defense is that middle line. There's nobody can get home.
Well, clearly
there was a whole bunch
Mike,
of talk
who would our
about
quarterback
TJ
have been?
Jones.
Who would be our quarterback?
Your guy Baker Mayfield.
Oh boy,
I would take that.
I will
So would
say
I.
he's balling.
Plays good on every team he's on.
Well,
Tell me I'm wrong.
unless he's injured.
We tell you
I
you're
said
wrong.
good.
Yeah,
I
unless
didn't-
he's it.
I
Or
didn't
playing
say
for
great.
or
I
playing
didn't
for
say
Matt
great.
Rule's Carolina Panthers.
I said good.
But yeah, kudos to him. He's balling out in Tampa for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the interior defensive line, there's they can't stop the run. They can't get to the quarterback. There's nothing.
I'm joking.
Even Purcell.
I'm joking, but let's also be clear: the Broncos would never have drafted Jordan Davis or Jalen Carter, because let's be honest, he was going to get drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles anyway. So,
The Eagles picked 4 picks behind us if we didn't trade the picks away.
With Jalen
Damn.
Carter, yeah, he's a good football player, but obvious character issues. I mean, this dude, I'm sorry, I have to keep bringing this up. Everyone's like, oh, why did Jalen Carter fall to the Eagles? Because he was street racing and somebody died.
Yeah. Well,
And within minutes of that happening, when he knew the accident happened, he still was covering his ass and lying about his involvement.
You sent me that clip, Glenn. That was insane.
Calm, totally calm.
And I know this is going to get roasted too, but Micah Parsons.
That's the one I was
the same thing.
That's the one I was going to bring up too. It's I know everybody wants to talk about how we probably should have drafted Micah Parsons and everything, but one, we got Pat Surtain, who was maybe the safest pick in the draft, taken above J.C. Horn. Do you think the Carolina Panthers would love to have Pat Surtain right now instead of J.C. Horn? Absolutely. And oh, by the way, the Cowboys lucked into getting Parsons. Let's not forget that they lucked into getting Parsons, because if I'm not mistaken, they actually wanted Pat Surtain. They wanted Pat Surtain. And the Broncos, once again, to what they do for the Dallas Cowboys, they take their draft pick. The Cowboys wanted Paxton Lynch. They lucked out on getting Dak Prescott. They wanted Cortland Sutton. They lucked out in getting Leighton Vander Esch. They wanted they wanted Pat Surtain, and they lucked out in getting Micah Parsons. So it's just it's the Surtain pick, as much as it was the Justin Fields pick, and I was driving the Justin Fields bandwagon, mind you, but it was the right pick of time. It still is the right pick of the time. Hopefully he is going to be a cornerstone for a while. And frankly, he might end up being the next big contract between he and Judy, the two Bama boys that end up getting a contract for the team.
Mike, can you bring up that last comment again, please?
Jeff Bryans?
The one about Justin Fields getting ruined. The one about Justin Fields getting ruined. The one that you literally just had up, that last one.
I can't read anymore.
Okay, well, basically, yes, this one from David. With Justin Fields, man, I think it's pretty clear at this point that some of these issues are on him. He's making some of the same rookie mistakes in year 3, staring down receivers, inaccuracy. I thought he actually played somewhat better in that Chiefs game, but in the first 2 weeks, man, it's clear that, yes, the coaching and the situation around him is crap, but Justin Fields himself is also playing like crap.
Yeah, I think the only way to actually know that discussion is it's like the Sam Darnold argument, right? Like to kind of see what he'd been able to do. And actually, he's played well in the preseason, what we saw, with the 49ers and everything. So, but I think it's like that's the argument to be made for like a Justin Fields. It's like in order to have that discussion, I want to see him on another team. True. Before I make the actual determination if it was, a Luke Getsy problem or, which, by the way, is Nathaniel Hackett's friend as well. But yeah.
Could Justin Fields be a potential reclamation project for Sean Payton? Maybe use him in like a Taysom Hill type role for the time being.
They'll just draft Heinrich Harburg.
Because, we can all agree when Justin Fields has the ball in his hands as a runner, he's explosive. He's deadly. And that's what I'm mostly worried about with this Bears game. Just to kind of talk about that a little bit with this Bears game, I'm not so much worried about Justin Fields through the air. I am worried about him with our defense that's been less than stellar at tackling, just absolutely gashing us on the ground.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so kind of spinning this thing all the way back to the beginning of talking about how we figure this out. I really do think that we're going to see some players either released or traded. And I think that if, my personal opinion, if Denver gets a top 5 pick, they trade back. And instead of going after quarterback because we have Russ, they go and get defensive tackle or offensive guard or linebacker. Or, dear God, anything. Somebody that can tackle.
My push on the trade back idea is this team, as much as they need depth, they need some more blue chip players on that team. And whether it's on the offensive side of the ball or defensive side of the ball, they need to take the best player available. Maybe and the best way that you have a trade back is you have an offer that you can't refuse on a trade back scenario. Like if on a trade back scenario, you're actually getting, maybe not just one, but another one in terms of if you're in the top 5. If you get something like that in a scenario, you're not saying no to that.
And that's what I'm saying is like if you have like a top 5 pick, you trade back to like 9, 10, 11, you get 2 first-round picks and maybe a second to add into everything else you got.
Or maybe a blue chip player even. If they could get like a blue chip player in one of those trades, like a bona fide starting defensive, like a blue chip D lineman or a blue chip left tackle. Like if they could get a veteran player like that in a potential trade, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think if you stay around that 9, sorry, Kim, if you stay around that 9, 10, 11, you can still get a blue chip draft prospect because you're still in like the top 10.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
So now let's figure out this Bears game. Because the Broncos are still 3-point favorites against the Bears. But are we really like 3-point favorites against the Bears? Are they that bad? Are they that much worse than us?
They're pretty effing putrid.
I want to say that the Broncos are better because I think they are. At least I said think.
On the offensive side of the ball, they definitely are.
I think offensively we are, yeah.
I realize thinking is really hard for me. So I say think. I think they're better. But I don't know. Like with what we've been able to see on the defensive side of the ball, it could be, like they could run like 50 times in this game and they could probably still score 20 points magically or something like with how it is so. And I don't even know if Justin Simmons is going to be back. It seems like he's still his hip is bothering him a little bit from everything that I've learned, and so I mean it's possible, but offensively they absolutely should be able to put up another 20 plus point performance. And I think the way to go about it is for the points discussion. If the Chicago Bears offense is held to under 17 points or right at like 17 and under, the Broncos will win this game. No question about it.
Okay, so we don't know if the Broncos will win that.
It all depends on how well Chicago runs the football, because we all know Denver's run defense is probably the worst in the league right now, and that's putting it nicely. So, and Chicago, man, if they can get something going in the run game, that does concern me. But at the same time, though, if Denver can sell out, load the box, try to stop the damn run, because at least with this game, we're not so much worried about Justin Fields beating us over the top. We were very worried about that in Miami with Vance Joseph calling all that soft shell coverage.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe in this game, Vance won't be afraid to actually play some single high man coverage and truly dare Justin Fields to throw the ball downfield. So I could see Denver truly selling out to shut down Chicago's run game and turn Justin Fields into a drop back passer. That's how we could win this game. And at least gives me some confidence knowing that we don't have to worry so much about Justin Fields beating us over the top.
Well, and I know that PS2 did not have a great game, but at the same time, Tyreek Hill. Like, I know he's a crappy human being, but damn it, he's fast.
But not only that, Mike, if you look at the entire starting defensive backfield, played every single play in a game in which their opponent scored 70.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is astounding that there were not some shift. And, look at our entire starters continued to play. I don't know if that was punishment. I don't know if Russ said I want to stay out there. I'm not sure, but, when you look at what the Dolphins did to our run defense, they initially had no intention of putting that many points on the board. They were really just trying to run out the clock, and the running backs just kept gashing this team. It finally got to the point where they're like, all right, I think we can maybe do something, and that's when White threw the bomb to Robbie Anderson.
Yeah.
Robbie chosen one.
Right. He'll probably change his name next week.
Fletch, like I said.
Yeah.
But
I'm pretty sure they gained yards taking a knee too. So
yeah,
they gained 10 yards. But that's the problem. Is that that's the wild card for us in Chicago? Is that if this run defense performs the same fashion, we couldn't even let guys run out the clock. Gage said putrid about the Bears. Last week was putrid for us. That said, I'd be shocked if the Broncos didn't walk away. That would be devastating.
I definitely think that the Broncos, it would be very devastating if Sean Payton's first win didn't come against the Bears. I will say subtly, it would be funny and ironic if they didn't beat the Bears, but then when they beat the Jets, ironically, that would have been that's their first win. So I'm just saying, ironically, it would have been kind of interesting if, but I think for me, on the defensive side of things, I kind of come back to this too. It's remember when we saw in preseason how, and even from what we were told, is that you're actually seeing more of the Fangio Evero type scheme with Christian Parker, and with what we were able to see with the creativity of the defense, the different blitzes, the different stunts, in preseason, and it was solid. You actually got a chance to see really good defensive play in preseason. I think that if there's any game for you to go back to that kind of game plan, I don't know why that you would deviate from something like that in preseason, but if you can go to something like that and bring back something to what was actually working in terms of all those creative blitzes and the man coverage, I think this is a great opportunity for them to go back to man.
Yep.
Do press man to man, exactly what Gage was talking about in terms of daring Justin Fields to throw the football. None of this putrid zone defense. They need to be able to play a physical brand of football, because I think when, obviously there's the whole stuff surrounding Kareem Jackson, but you should never take the dog out of a fight. And I think that the Broncos still have to play that physical brand of football. And I hope that the Kareem Jackson thing isn't having ripple effects on not just him, but the entire defense as a whole. And the Broncos need to have that physical game where they punch them in the mouth, and it's for all 4 quarters.
Yep. And I think with playing the man coverage, that could really help with some of our personnel deficiencies. Damari Mathis is a big one I think about, man. Hey, DeMarty, you can't blow any zone assignments if you're just running with your guy mano-y-mano. Like, seriously, play some damn man coverage. I understand not wanting to do it against the Miami Dolphins, but being afraid to play man hell, even the Raiders and the Commanders too, but play some damn man coverage against the Chicago Bears, Vance. Please play some man. I'm begging you.
For Pat Surtain's sake, play some man as well.
Yeah, that too.
And Glenn, I'm glad you brought this up because before we go, I did want to bring up one more thing. There's a lot of things going around about people saying it was disrespectful to have Russell Wilson in there the entire game. You're getting blown out by 40 points. Why in God's name is he still in there?
I mean,
I think he didn't want to get out of the game. I think he is that type of leader. You know, just that's just that I can't. I can picture Russ.
Yeah,
saying I don't want to leave.
well,
You know, that said, I'm surprised that we keep everybody in.
Yeah.
But maybe they all said it. I don't know. There didn't look like a lot of heart on that sideline.
Yeah.
So I can't picture that everybody said that. But I mean, that's my only thought.
I agree on that sentiment, Glenn, because I think let's not forget. Now, granted, it was preseason, but like, did we not see something to the likes of this in preseason, where they actually played them more than they should, or they played them a lot longer in a preseason game than they probably should, like right, like especially the first preseason game we saw that. Like, why did they play the starters more than what we come to expect? It's for one, they didn't play in preseason, and they needed time to gel. And I think that this is just one more time, again, even from the defensive side of things as well as the offense, they need that opportunity to gel. So, like, in order for them to gel, you also have to play, unfortunately, in a 70-20 devastating loss. So I think that's the thing, is like they need that chemistry as much as the defense needs that chemistry.
Yep, these were basically preseason reps for them in the end of that game. And I mean, I understand doing that, but there's also the part of me that's like, okay, do you really want to add injury to insult? We saw Mike McGlinchey briefly exit the game in garbage time. If Russ had turned an ankle, or hell forbid, had Javonte blown his knee out again, I would have literally thrown up if Javonte had blown his knee out again or something like that had happened. So that's where I'm like, I understand trying to build those reps, but at the same time, man, you don't want your guys to get hurt in this damn game. Get everyone out. Let Jarrett Stidham get some reps. Let Jaleel McLaughlin. Why didn't we see Jaleel McLaughlin in garbage time? That's what I want to know. If there's one time where you want to see what he can do in that situation, play 38, damn it.
Yeah. Well, also Riley Moss was active. Now, granted, he didn't play much.
Too.
He didn't play much. I think he only had like small number of snaps, and I don't know if it was special teams, but he didn't play much.
This would have been a great point to throw Riley into the fire, man. Even you've got fast guys on the Dolphins, even in their reserves. I mean, Robbie Anderson burned us deep downfield, so why not? Why not?
And why didn't JL Skinner play?
I'm curious about this decision. Like, I hope that JL Skinner's not in the Alberto Kawabanam doghouse right now. Like I just hope he's not in like this early on, because it's a curious decision. So Jordan and Mario were at the game together, and Jordan told us originally that they were going to play two safeties and not activate JL Skinner, and that was such a curious decision why they decided to only roll with two safeties. So was that just to show Kareem Jackson a message, just like saying, we want you to play the entire game, but also like we want you to finish the entire game? So like I don't know. Like, it's such a curious decision why they rolled with those two.
Yeah. Anything else before we close this out?
Nope.
Oh.
Nope. All right. So before we go, I do want to point out, I'm going to bring it up. The merch store that we have, we just added some new shirts. We got some mainly Broncos designs. We got Orange and Brew. We got some new MHRT designs. So make sure you go check that out. I just said that.
Okay.
Said that already. I put the link in the chat, so go ahead and click on that. But yeah, we've got
It actually
all
looks
the
fire.
clients for all the different shows. So you can go in there and check out, order the merch for your favorite show. There's still some shows I got to add on there because we keep adding a lot.
We're
But yeah,
big
they're all
network,
in there.
man.
We're big network, so that's all in there. Make sure you go check it out. We greatly appreciate it. We want to thank everybody that was in the chat for today's show. I know we had a lot to cover, and a lot of it sucked, but hopefully it gets better this weekend with a strong defeat with the Bears. So that should be good. But we do love Broncos country. We love the Broncos. We love every single person that was in the chat. Make sure you go check out all the shows on the MHRT network. We got shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then we've got the neighborhood on game days. So check that out as well. We love y'all. We'll see you guys later. Peace out.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, go.